so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share, I'm very excited to have Justin Deschamps here with me on the show. Justin's primary aim is to reveal the powers of mind and consciousness in developing the self, working with others, and, of course, leaving a positive impact in his wake. And super happy to have you here, Justin. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I know Erica, who sometimes is steps in when I'm away, on a trip or something like that, or co-host even occasionally, and helps to book, my guest. Does a lot for the show, and I know she was raving about you and meeting you a while back, and that I definitely had to have you on, and now we're here. So I'm excited, man. You got some definitely some interesting rabbit holes of conversation that you sort of have a lot of insight and information on. So I'm excited to pick your brain, my friend.
Oh yeah, it's great to be here. I love a great, good, scintillating conversation.
Exactly. I like that word too. One of my early Soul Share guest is Kalia Scintilla, who is a musical artist. I love his music, and I share it sometimes on the outro of my daily episodes. And so I love how he used that word. That's instantly what I think of when I hear scintillating. I think of Kalia Scintilla, who made that part of his artist name. So yeah, that's a great word.
Well, yeah, Brandon, words are sonic symbols. They're like things that we use to describe reality. So I love talking about words. I love describing words. I have a friend of mine that we were both kind of wordsmiths, and we have a problem when you're a really good problem when you're a deep thinker, when you do a lot of thinking, when you're constantly analyzing and contemplating and getting inspired. You tend to have ideas come into your head that you don't have words for. So then you have to do the fun part of like coming up with a new word. And so, yes, words are great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I like to say it's spelling, right? You're casting a spell, abracadabra. I create as I speak, and so yeah, words are they're energy, right? They're the best way one of the best ways we have to invoke a feeling, emotion, and they're fun to get good at using. I think I do my best to be good at using them anyway.
Totally, yeah. Well, I do a lot of research into psychology, and a lot of my work is related to figuring out solutions for people that they can use to better improve their lives. And one of the big breakthroughs I've had recently is how we use and phrase our personal perspective and our narrative as it shapes our interpretation of life. So, I mean, we have this inner dialogue that we use to basically write the story of our lives. And the manner in which that takes literally shapes how we perceive experience. So, if the story of your life and the character that you are in that life is somebody who's a victim, who feels disempowered, who feels like the universe is out to get them, that no matter what they try to do, that's always a failure and they're always guaranteed to have failure. Well, what kind of life do you think you're going to live? How do you think you're going to feel in that situation? You're not going to feel too great, are you? So learning how just to use the words that we speak to ourselves and make sure that's empowering and uplifting and regulates what's called the meta state. So the perspective that we have on our life is regulated by the language processes in our brain. So when we take ownership of that and use that consciously, which most people do not, then we can literally retune our perspective. It's like taking off the funky glasses that you've been wearing for your entire life that are covered with gunk and grease and everything, and cleaning it off and finally seeing things clearly for the first time. And when you do that, you find yourself feeling more and more inspired. You feel this growing sense of excitement and joy as you think about what's happening in the future. And then you feel safe and secure in those feelings because you know that you can have that empowerment because you're finally taking control of your consciousness in ways you've never done before. So that's the power of language. And that's something I've been working and developing for the past few months here.
Oh, man. Yeah, this is going to be a good soul share. I can see you are awesome. So real quick, Justin, why don't we start, it's funny because we dove right in. I always typically start at the top of the podcast and ask people, the same sort of question. And then I also have the same ending question. I'm pretty predictable with that. And that opening question typically is, you're in an elevator. The guy next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. I feel like maybe we've already gotten some of that from you, but why don't you give us a quick summary?
Sure. Well, my passion is really just helping other people. For as early as I can remember, I've just felt this huge yearning and drive to accumulate knowledge and information that I could use to improve my life and other people's lives. And that drive was so strong in me, it kind of made me really interested in all things knowledge, and I became really science heavy as a young adult and a young person in general. And then I had these series of experiences where I was asking questions because I was really inquisitive. I wanted to know how things worked. So I'd constantly be sitting and just kind of daydreaming. And, often as a child, you'd see me laying on the floor, like staring at the ceiling, kind of blankly thinking about things. And I had a lot of experiences where I'd ask a question and then I'd receive an answer in my mind as an insight. And then I'd go and ask my mother or father about it to go research it, and come to find out my insight was accurate. This doesn't happen all the time, but it happened enough to the point where I became aware of it. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? This seems like this is, I didn't know what to make of it at the time, but the conclusion that I drew was, this is something important. I feel like this is something I should be using to do good in the world with. And I really kind of dedicated myself to that early on, started studying psychology and things. And many years later, I had an awakening experience through discovering cures for cancer. that completely shook me to my foundations. I had what I call a crisis of belief, which is essential for awakening from a psychological perspective. And what it did is it completely destroyed my house of cards. So what tends to happen is you accumulate all these beliefs in your life, and they explain your experience. And as long as they explain it enough to satisfy you, then you're like, okay, my curiosity is satisfied and I don't need to know anything else.
Right.
But when you have a crisis of belief, when you have awakening moment, when you get red pilled, you learn something that causes you to question so much of your beliefs that it basically strips everything to your foundations, and you're kind of left like naked standing there from a certain perspective.
Right.
So once that happened, I started to re-examine everything in my life. I was an atheist for most of my life, didn't believe in any spirituality. And within about a year, I had fallen back into spirituality. I was into UFOs, extraterrestrials. I was studying a lot of esoteric spirituality, law, conspiracies. So yeah, I would say my passion now is to just pour myself into what I call the great work, which is to learning as much about my consciousness and mastering my own beingness. And by extension, learning the tools that I can use to help other people learn how to master their consciousness so that we all can participate in the great adventure of making the world a better place and realizing the golden age that I know we can on this planet.
That was like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory elevator ride, where we just like blasted off completely past the 10 floors. But I'm really happy for it. So thank you for that. Yeah, that's amazing, man. It really is such an interesting thing that you're pointing out. So many people are trying to figure out, how do I change the world? Like, how do I make a big difference? And, I'm sure you've seen the quote before. Yesterday, I was smart and wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise and I want to change myself, or something to that effect, right? And it's like, it's as above, so below, as within, reflected out. It's like, that's the best way we all can ultimately impact the world, is by figuring it out within ourselves, and then letting that sort of, ripple of impact sort of roll out in the way that it does. And there's so many different paths for someone to take to their own awakening process, and sort of mentors along the way, or guides. And that's what I love about like doing this show, for example. It's like, the people who are really ripe for my vibration, right? My vibrational offering, if you will, in my guests, such as yourself, they're going to find their way to this show out of just a mountain of information and programming that's out there at this current time, in our world. But those that are the closest vibrational match sort of find the path. And for a lot of people, it's kind of like what you just mentioned, is they sort of start down that path of maybe not even really thinking about the spiritual stuff, spirituality, as much as like, hold on, what's going on with some of this like UFO activity, or some of these conspiracies I'm like looking into, and I'm seeing like they've got legs, like there's something really going on here. And then that leads them, they come in through a different door. But I think that's an amazing journey, it sounds like. And it really answered what was my next question. Give me some background into your story, like starting to have answers come to you as a child for things. That's a really powerful experience for a kid to deal with, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, at the time, I remember I just thought that that's how everybody experienced things. They just would think of things, and then they'd either have an experience that they would learn about. So sometimes I would have the question come through, and I'm like, what is, how does my blood absorb oxygen? I would just be curious about things like that. And then I'd be doing my thing throughout the day. And then lo and behold, I'd hear a conversation that was happening, or I'd see some show on PBS or something that was talking about that. So I'm like, whoa, this is like literally like living a kind of a synchronistic life.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting is I kind of had this organic, like agnostic spirituality. I kind of just knew that the universe was intelligent and that I could commune with it. And it just was an implicit belief that I had, and knowingness that I had, all the way up until around 10 or 11 years old. And then I started to question spirituality and religion. I wasn't really exposed to much religion, but I had a friend at the time who was Protestant. And we were talking a lot about, religion and belief and, things like this. And he told me some of the dogma from the religion, and it just seemed so counter to what I was experiencing in my life. I kind of threw everything out with it. I said, it's all this spirituality stuff is nonsense. And as soon as I started to discount spirituality, and I kind of became an atheist officially in my own mind anyway, I started to actually have reductions in my synchronistic experiences. I started to have less of those. Wow. So yeah, it's interesting. It kind of, and this is an idea that, it kind of touches a lot into religion, especially Christianity. But there's this idea that through faith in the creator, in the concept of the universe that's intelligent, you can actually, improve your life. Some of the things that come from religion is, particularly Christianity, is, faith in the gospel, faith that you are a son of God will give you salvation. And I always thought that was just kind of like some, slogan or something that meant nothing. But now I'm starting to realize through my study of psychology and philosophy that no, when you believe in the truth, and if the truth is describing the fact that we actually live in a universe that's conscious and intelligent, when you believe that, well, if reality is predicated on free will, then that means that you're literally aligning this really powerful component to this objective mechanic of your beingness to the universe itself. And that actually will change your consciousness materially. So this isn't just some slogan that people can say. When you actually believe that you're a child of the divine, then it materially affects your consciousness. And my life experience is interesting because I kind of was swimming in both pools, so to speak. I did the atheism thing. I did the scientism thing for 10, 15 years. And I was a devout atheist. I would be the guy that would try to destroy your belief in religion for a while there, and now I have the total opposite experience where I'm like, no, I know what it's like to live a life feeling like you're cosmically abandoned, and it doesn't feel good. It makes you wander around aimlessly. You become pleasure seeking. You start to develop addictions. You just, all sorts of things go wrong. But then when you realign yourself philosophically and intellectually and conceptually to this concept that you are actually connected to the universe, and you let that fill in and settle in with you, it completely changes everything, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really powerful trajectory to have, sort of like, okay, I'm going to walk the path as this atheist perspective for an extended period of time. Was there and then sort of something at some point obviously flipped in you, right? Was there a particular experience or moment that led to you sort of saying, hold on, maybe I've had this wrong?
Right. Well, I had an experience where my trust in my own beliefs was shattered and destroyed. And I think that's what I call, again, the crisis of belief, what you might call a catastrophic crisis of belief, which is really important from a psychological perspective for awakening. And once I had done that, I started to re-examine my previous conclusions with religion and spirituality. I initially thought it was all just basically like a giant scam. But I started to look into it more, and there was a few books I'd read that, really opened me up to this. And one of them was Conversations with God.
One of my favorites.
Oh, yeah. It's a great book there. So much wisdom in that. Another one was the Dolores Cannon books. I can't remember. I think it was Keepers of the Garden. And The Law of One. But the one that really did it for me was the Urantia book. The Urantia book I found out about through The Law of One. I was reading The Law of One, and it said, there's this book, Urantia book. It wasn't passed by the council. And I'm like, oh, well, what's all that about? So I picked it up and started reading it. And it's like a scientific or lawyerly description of the universe from a top-down perspective. It's like 2,200 pages, extremely dense information.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And to this day, I have not found a work or a book that contains as many ideas about spirituality and the universe and philosophy and things as that book.
Wow.
So
what, how do you spell that? I don't know if I'm familiar with that one.
Urantia is spelled U-R-A-N-T-A, Urantia.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's certainly controversial, and let me just throw in a disclaimer here. I don't espouse or promote any book or work as absolute truth. So
Sure.
even though I get a lot out of the Urantia book, I still think there's things in there that aren't as accurate. So I want to throw that out there. But, but yeah, so
I'm with you on that. I always say, just kind of approach it. I think there's a lot of truth in a lot of books, but I don't ever, just because someone's right about one particular subject doesn't necessarily mean they are about it another, right? I think there's a bit of truth and untruth almost in everything. So it's really important to approach it from that perspective of, hey, I'm super open and I'm going to, sort of what sounds and feels true to me is what's most important. And then, of course, applying it to my life to see what sort of, let me try this on, right? Let me try this approach to navigating 3D reality on and see where it leads me. But I found, that's the best way to approach all this information because there's so much, right?
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I study a lot of philosophy, particularly a branch of philosophy called epistemology, which is essentially, it's like the science of discernment. How do you know that your beliefs are true? What process do you use to vet out your beliefs? How do you know that your beliefs have merit? All that kind of thing. Things that are like, you would think extremely important given how important knowledge is for our lives. I mean, everything that you do in your life has to pass through what you believe is real. So, making sure that what you believe is real is actually real, you'd think it'd be a good idea.
Right. Definitely.
So yeah, one of the things I was going to mention is that one of the branches of epistemology is pragmatism. And that's basically, it's because we can't know for sure if a description of reality is actually describing reality because we have limited perception. We have to take a leap of faith, essentially. We have to say, okay, well, I've been learning about these spiritual principles that supposedly, I have this infinite potential and all these things. And let me live my life as if this is true and let me see what happens. That's a pragmatic perspective. And if you start to actually have beneficial things happen, if you can actually predict and do things accurately in your life based off of this knowledge, then from an epistemological perspective, it's likely to be true. It has pragmatic value. So there you go.
Yeah. I absolutely love that approach. It's what I always say as, at this point in my own journey of exploring the ultimate nature of reality and, what the heck is really going on here and applying a lot of my personal beliefs and perspectives, I feel pretty confident in a lot of the perspectives. So I always say to someone, hey, especially when I'm having a conversation with someone who's really new down this path, just listen and explore the concepts with an open mind. If you start trying to apply some of those perspectives to dealing with situations in your own life, ultimately, what I would say, if you really are doing that and applying some of these ideas that we're one with, all things, and everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. And as a result, I'm going to act like I'm, dealing with an extension of self. And this is a reflection that is coming up for me for a reason. It's happening for me and not to me. And once you start trying on some of these perspectives as you navigate your life, buckle up your seatbelt because I'm pretty confident you'll find the same results I have with it, right? And that's sort of always my approach to talking to anyone about it.
Precisely, yeah. I think part of what I call the great work is helping other people open up their own consciousness. And a lot of times, like I was talking about earlier, I mean, we kind of get stuck in a mindset. Life is hard. Having to learn new things and face the unknown is challenging. And there's a lot of experiences we have early on that make us feel like, well, we got to be careful about, opening ourselves up to things because we might be deceived and whatnot. So by the time we get to our 20s or our 30s or something like that, we've got a pretty rigid belief system, and it doesn't necessarily change all that much unless you have some type of awakening experience. And when you have that awakening experience, it can be really unsettling. I mean, I remember when I was going through mine, there was a few months there where I was like, the world was a dark, crazy place, and I did not know what was going on.
Right. Yeah, and I think that you've went pretty deep down the rabbit hole that a lot of people have, which is the whole UFO, the idea that aliens are among us or visit us since always, and then of course this whole idea of a secret space program, which is something that's really got more attention, I feel, in recent years. Of course, with there's been cosmic disclosure and Gaia has went deep down that rabbit hole of conversation. So I'd love to hear your perspective on all of that, because it's not something that we've really explored a lot on the show, and I'd love to kind of see what your journey has been, with that area of exploration.
Definitely. Well, I'm really interested in law and how societies work and how human beings can work better together to realize the most ideal living conditions. And one of the things that I was really interested is in studying in ET cultures. I was really curious once I finally let myself start to entertain the belief that, maybe there's some truth to this. Mm-hmm. I was curious to discover there was a whole lot of information out there from channeled sources and alleged insiders and whistleblowers that have apparently been in contact with extraterrestrials, negative or positive. They've been involved in secret space programs and black budget projects. So, as you start to dive down that rabbit hole, which is pretty deep, you're immediately starting to be confronted with these ideas that, there really are extraterrestrial civilizations out there. They seem to have their own trajectory and their course and agenda. And it also seems to be wrapped up with spirituality and some type of universal purpose and cosmic purpose. And the government seems to be playing a role in it too. So one of the things I did a presentation last year at Contact in the Desert, which was basically a synopsis of all of my research into this. I called it a blueprint for a better world through understanding ET contact and culture. And if you just do a Google search for that, you can find it on YouTube. You can also just go to my YouTube channel, Stillness in the Storm. It's on there. And basically what I've been able to distill in my research is that there's a set of what you might call spiritual principles that guide everything in reality, including our own government. So our own government and the legal system has to acknowledge these spiritual realities, these divine laws, in order to retain their claim to a power and authority. And they've done a really careful and precise job of shaping the slavery system so that essentially we enslave ourselves, because free will is, one of the highest laws in the universe. So one of the interesting things is that in a lot of the extraterrestrial information, particularly like the Law of One, and sources like this, they're essentially talking to us about this system, this matrix that we, through the power of our belief and our consciousness and our manifestation power, we're manifesting this world that we're living in right now. And we're kind of in this weird situation where we're kind of like screaming out to the universe saying, please help me, please free us from this horrible situation. And the universe is looking down on us saying, yes, you should free yourself and you should do something about it. Right. So yeah, I would say as an overarching interpretation, the secret space program, extraterrestrial body of knowledge was probably the thing that opened my mind up the most about what it kind of gave me perspective on what the world could be like if we started to follow these principles. And then, from there gets to the nuts and bolts aspect, I guess we could talk about for a moment. There's a lot of suppressed technology. There's been over 5,000-6,000 patents that have been suppressed by the military-industrial complex since the 70s. Since the 50s. Lockheed Martin, the Rand Corporation.
The stuff that like Carr did is something that I was just checking out the other day. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Howie Carr. He was, I believe, he was the apprentice of somebody that worked with Nikola Tesla, and he had developed a UFO technology that was based on Overunity principles. So, one of the interesting things about studying this free energy technology is that it all relates to consciousness in some way. Right. And one of Harry Carr's technologies was a UFO or a vehicle that he was able to develop that actually interfaced directly with your consciousness. So apparently when you went into this vehicle, you didn't see any knobs or dials or anything. So there was just like a console. You would sit in it. You would go into a specific type of consciousness state, and then you would interface with this machine, and you could literally just think about where you wanted to go, and then you would effectively go there like instantly. So the lines get blurred, when we start to get into these really deep secret space program kind of things. It kind of, the lines between science and consciousness and life all start to get blurred.
Yeah. And, then you have things that come out like a few years ago. I think all of a sudden it came out that there's like from the Pentagon or something, like $1 trillion is missing or something, some crazy number. I might have that wrong, but it's something to that effect. And it's like, okay, hold on. People are saying, that there's been all this, people like Corey Good, there's been all this money, sent into, sort of funneled into the secret space program. And then all of a sudden you start hearing, hold on, we're missing $1 trillion. Like, it's like, hold on, maybe there's something to this. That's a lot of money, right?
Oh yeah. And this is not a new thing either. I mean, back in the 80s, the New York Times posted an article, I believe it was entitled something like $100 toilet seats. Yeah. And somebody had done a review of some of the military budgets, and they realized some of these line items were completely obscure, like, $100 hammers, $100 toilet seats. What the heck are they doing with $100 toilet seat? Well, it doesn't take a whole lot of conceptual hula hoops to ask yourself the question, maybe this is a cover. Maybe they're taking this money and funneling it somewhere else.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating rabbit hole. And I feel like, a lot of people, you can go down that rabbit hole and it can get, sort of scary, and for me personally, I find it, just like I talked about earlier, I find it really fascinating. But my view on it is one of, okay, if there, whatever is actually going on, if, you even hear some pretty wild things like, there's these reptilian, I was just watching, an interview on Joe Rogan talking with Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins about his experience with someone shape-shifting in front of him.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, I was sober. I'm not going to go into too many details, but it was, it happened twice. The person was not wearing clothes. I was completely sober. And Billy Corgan, actually, the interview, he's really cool and smart. And it's not like this is a hokey person at all. And I love his music, by the way. But so it was really fascinating, to see him kind of come out with this. And I think he actually talked about it on Howard Stern a little bit as well. But yeah, it's and then you hear these ideas of, okay, there's these reptilian entities that actually are controlling our whole system, and any of that for me, even whether it is or isn't happening, it's like whatever is happening, what I trust is the process, right? That if we, if there's an enslavement of mankind that's went on to a certain degree, and I think there's some evidence to that with our monetary system. It's definitely sort of a slave system that's unnecessary and pyramid scheme, if you will. And so there's certainly elements that show that to be true from a visible perspective, for me anyway. And if that is actually what's going on, and it is weirder than we could ever imagine, that this negative entities are running our planet and things like that, and it's like, I know it happened by design, and it's part of you can't be the good guy without a bad guy. You can't overcome something. You can't be the hero without the dragon to slay, right? So it's all part of the ultimate grand vision and plan. And so for me, when I move into that, and it's like, okay, whether it is or isn't happening, it is what it is, and I trust the process, and I think that's really important for people out there, especially maybe even some who would hear this and now go down this rabbit hole for the first time, because I think a lot of people go down that rabbit hole and then end up racked with fear, right?
Of course, yeah. Well, right, and this is why pursuing a spiritual path and philosophy is so important, and I'm really fortunate that I kind of discovered that immediately when I had my awakening experience. But yeah, when it comes to these more sensational rabbit holes like the secret space program or things like this, you're going to be immediately confronted with the question of, well, how do I know that any of this is true? And, this is why learning the tools of discernment is so important. So let me just take a moment right now. This is one of the things I focus on exclusively. This is one of my major focuses in my work, is trying to teach people the tools of discernment, because it's really important knowing how to properly nest and define and contextualize the information you're absorbing. So if you go to my website, stillnessinthestorm.com, up at the top, there's an article. It's called Discernment.
Stillness. Let me just say that again, just really clearly. Stillnessinthestorm.com, in case anyone didn't quite catch that because you said it fast.
Oh, yeah. My apologies. So, if you go there, I wrote a whole article about that discernment. So when it comes to these complex topics, I'll just kind of give you my analysis of these things. A lot of this stuff is in the unconfirmed category. And it's in a place where we don't really know if it's true. We don't know if it's untrue either. And one of the things that, as you start to awaken and expose yourself to more and more crazy information and knowledge, you're going to have to start to become okay with uncertainty. And the more you can develop appreciation for uncertainty, the easier it is to discern these things. So when it comes to discernment of information, one of the things that we look for is, well, what is the claim? What is the thing that we're trying to say is true? And then what information or evidence do we have to support that claim? And when there's no evidence to support the claim, sometimes we'll be like, oh, well, because there's no evidence, I'm just going to assume it's not true and discount it. Or you might do the reverse. It might resonate with you. It might make you feel good, but you don't have any proof to say it's real, but you're going to believe it anyway because it makes you feel good. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with those two choices. But where it becomes a problem is when you develop personal dogma, where you say, oh, well, I'm not going to believe any of this secret space program stuff because it's all BS, and you're going to close your mind to it. That's where there's a problem. Or the other end of the equation, I'm going to believe this version of reality because it makes me feel the best. And even though I might not be completely accurate, I'm going to completely ignore anything that would tell me, things to the contrary. Well, what's happening there is you're blocking yourself to new information, right?
Right. My dad. I instantly think of my dad with that. It's like dogma with organized religion and a very conservative narrow bandwidth. It's like it's really just wild to observe a human like that, with their heels dug in that hard when there's so much coming out. And it's like, nope, sure. I'm keeping the blinders on. Nope. This is how it is. This is what it is. Nothing else. Everything else is the devil. It's crazy.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, this is where the being okay with uncertainty is where the spiritual path comes in, I feel like, because one of the things that happens when you discover the spiritual realities of existence is that you realize that you're a finite creature. Your mind is limited in the sense that it only can store so much information. But the truth is infinite. It's eternal. It exists in the eternal past. It exists in the eternal now, and it exists in the eternal future, which means that even if you were like Stephen Hawking, even if you were a guy who had eidetic memory and you could remember everything you've ever exposed to, you're still only going to have a faint glimmer of all the truth that's out there. Even if you studied information for 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years, you'd still only be a speck of dust in the massive ocean of information that exists out there.
And the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, right?
Precisely. Yes, exactly. So, what that seems unsettling at first, but what it does is it properly defines the boundaries or the limits to who you are. And once you come to terms with that, once you realize that, wait a minute, life is really just an adventure of exploration where it's just the more I open myself up to as much as I possibly can, the more my mind will naturally organize this information into progressively more accurate bodies of knowledge and understanding that I will use to navigate my life, to help me realize and manifest my goals. And that's what that spiritual perspective and that path is. So once you lay claim to that, then you get this kind of life personality stability where it really doesn't matter what information is being thrown at you, whether it's the secret space program or satanic ritual abuse, some of the really crazy dark things that are out there. When you have that spiritual backdrop to everything, then you realize everything is actually unfolding to progress things forward. Everything's moving in an evolution. And we could certainly get into some of that with some of the darker things, but even like the darker things, like these things that are coming out about corruption, there's more light that gets shined into these dark places, the more that we, who are the players in this game called life, can use that information to make the world a better place. And that's, I think the big uplifting, positive aspect of the spiritual message is when you lay claim to that path, it makes everything in your life so much better.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it makes me think of I think it was Osho who said something. I'm kind of paraphrasing. Certainty is death. Uncertainty is where life happens. And a lot of times we've been programmed to the exact opposite. Like, I got to have all the facts and have so much of this. So many people are in hell on earth trying to control everything and trying to create certainty when there's really no such thing. And when you get into this state of surrender and trust, and to me, this is, the whole idea, and where religion has grabbed onto this whole idea of faith. I love faith is like, I have so much faith in my higher self or source or whatever you want to call it. It makes it, like you said, no matter what may come, I know I will be fine, right? And I will, change is, you're an eternal being that's always been and always will be, and change is guaranteed. What else matters once you really, really get that?
Exactly, yeah, and I mean that's the foundation. There was a quote, I think it was in the Rancho, but it might have come from somewhere else. But it said, "If you seek for God, you find everything, and when you find everything, you find God."
Yes, right.
Which is, if the word God rubs some people the wrong way, we can put in the creator or the universe or, all that is. But the point is that, from a psychological perspective, the lines of who you are, your identity, get really blurred when you start to think of the grandest concepts of existence. And a really good example of this is, when you're in the throes of really deep pain, like I'm sure everybody's had, either a bad stomach flu or, maybe they had an injury, when you had to deal with some really intense pain. Well, one of the things that happens is you start to interpret the experience as if the whole universe is inflicting this on you. I'll throw myself out there as an example. I have, earlier in my life, I had some really nasty addictions. I was a heroin and cocaine addict for about 3 years. It was a really deep, dark time in my life. And I learned a whole bunch about myself in the process. So it's like one of these things that I'm grateful for in the end. But, when you're in the trenches, it doesn't feel so great.
Right.
And, when you're detoxing from these drugs, you feel horrible. Your whole world just seems dark and nasty. This particularly heroin is a drug that mediates and works with the emotional response system, particularly the pleasure system. So when you're getting off of that stuff, everything just hurts, and you're kind of in this deep pain all the time. And what I noticed was happening is that I was starting to project my pain and my frustration and what I was feeling and identifying with that pain and projecting it onto the universe itself, being it's like the universe is doing this to me. So what that means is that, who you think of yourself to be is really tied deeply to how you think the universe works, what you think the universe's purpose is, what you think's life purpose is. So if you take command, if you take ownership of those ideas, which a lot of people don't do in their life, but if you do that, then it really allows you to have much greater control over your own sense of self, and that kind of old Buddhist principle of letting the ego die, which is our limited self, and embracing the kind of cosmic higher self that really starts to come online when you embrace that path.
Yeah. It's sort of like, what I think about with heroin, and it's funny because I just had an ex-partner reach out to me who I haven't really talked to much in the last couple of years, but she has someone that she works with who went through heroin addiction, and she's like, I just feel like you talking to them could be really, really helpful. And, because it's one thing to go through, something like that in general, but certainly then you're going through it and you don't have any concept a lot of times of the ultimate nature of reality and sort of this idea, like you have the perspective on it now, that, hey, that was happening for me, not to me. And it gave me a perspective that, the only way through it was through it. Like the only way to gain that perspective was going through the trenches, as you said. So it's, man, so many people that are lost in addiction and then don't have the perspective on, while they're doing it, it's not a part of the equation that they have a greater perspective on why it's happening to them. That's quite the path to sign up for, I would say. That's a trying one, man. So I applaud your bravery as a soul to sign up for that at some level, right?
Totally. Yeah. Well, my life is kind of a tapestry of extreme events and things like this. I think that's kind of true for anybody who takes on a mission. When you say you want to do something meaningful, the universe is like, all right, well, here you go. Now that you've signed up for this, now you got to get trained up. Now we're going to have some fun with this.
Right. So question.
Very interesting.
Very, very. So question for you. As someone who has followed closely with the UFO stuff, I want to just get back to that a little bit.
Sure.
What is your sort of grand view of it? And I know this is a deep conversation. We could probably talk for hours, but if you had to sort of sum up to someone, okay, here's what I think is going on with, extraterrestrial, intelligence and how it applies and relates to us here on Earth, and curious about that, sort of your summary or overview of that, and then after all your research, and then also, do you think disclosure is imminent?
Okay. Well, let's see. I would say, in all my research, there definitively seems to be a lot of cases to support the idea that we have been visited by extraterrestrials for a very long time. Mm-hmm. There's, for a good body of research on this, Ancient Aliens has a lot of information, even though it's kind of presented in a tabloid fashion. There's a lot of stuff there that actually does come from good reputable sources like Eric von Daniken and various people like this. So we have from ancient history, we have a lot of examples of what appears to be extraterrestrial contact. So, for example, the Sumerian culture emerged seemingly out of nowhere. We allegedly went from like hunter-gatherers to a culture that had law, concepts of civilization, a financial system, all these things, modern technologies, and insofar as agriculture, all this stuff got kind of thrust onto the scene within, a very short period of time. So that's one data point to suggest that there might be ancient contact. We also have the pyramid sites all over the planet. And a lot of these structures, particularly the Great Pyramid, is a really good example. It was built with such extreme precision that we can't replicate that technology to this day with all of our advanced technology. So that's another data point that suggests that we might have, at the very least, have been very advanced in our past. Well, then we have in the modern times, we have a lot of experiences coming through in the way of official and government investigation. So prior to the official secrecy program that was launched in the 60s, the government and academia took the investigation of flying saucers and UFOs very seriously. And it wasn't until the, I believe it was the Condon report, don't quote me on that, where they basically asked the question, should we be disclosing the extraterrestrial presence to society? And they concluded that they should not, and that it would threaten industry and threaten various control systems like religion on the planet. So Project Blue Book and some of these other official investigations were effectively at their conclusion were designed to tell the public, well, we've been looking into this stuff for 20 years. There's no truth to it. Go back to your regular lives. Nothing to see here, kind of thing. And they started a campaign of disinformation, particularly using Hollywood and media. So one of the psychological manipulation tools they use is what I call false knowledge anchoring. So you take a real concept and then you put it in a movie that's nested in a fictional frame. So your mind is exposed to the idea, but it's within a fictional narrative. And because of that, it compartmentalizes it in your own head. But now if you're exposed to that information, so if, let's say you see a movie like Independence Day, where they're talking about how, extraterrestrial.
Men in Black.
Yeah, or Men in Black. Yeah, there's a bunch of them, So if you see that, there's this story apart in Independence Day where they're saying that, well, yeah, Roswell, they were extraterrestrials that landed in Roswell and crashed, and we recovered an extraterrestrial craft, and we used that technology to develop and build out a lot of the modern technologies we have. That was in the movie, and they're literally effectively taking a thread out of actual history and putting it out there in a fictional form. So one of the things that does psychologically for a person is they have the information in their head, but they believe it's fictional. So now if I come to you and I start to tell you about this and treat it seriously, you're going to be like, oh, well, no, you're just quoting stuff from the movie.
I saw the movie too.
Exactly. So I would say, as a summary, there is an ocean of information to suggest that extraterrestrials have been coming here, and that the government has been reverse engineering and developing an extremely advanced body of technology that we loosely call the secret space program. And to answer the final question about disclosure, I think one of the things that I read in the, I believe it was the Condon report, was that they knew that they weren't going to be able to keep things secret forever. But they had to basically prepare society to release this information, but in such a way that it allowed them to maintain control over society in the way that they want, the powers that be, the dynastic families that have been in control of the planet more or less for all of human history. So I think that there's two disclosure initiatives happening. And I think there's also what has been loosely termed an alliance. So I think there's the cabal or the deep state version of disclosure that's trying to slowly drip out disclosure in a way that they can maintain control over society. And that's happening, just look at over the past 20 years. I mean, I remember back in the 90s, I wasn't even really into any of this stuff back then, but nobody took UFOs and, things seriously. The X-Files was like a really cool show that people watched, but everybody knew it was fictional and, that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, now we're living in a time where most people, they just did a survey on this. I think it was 70% of people believe that extraterrestrials were real and that they've been in contact with the planet in some capacity. So the shift in public thinking related to extraterrestrials and UFOs, and even the idea that the government has secret technology, that's kind of just generally accepted now, but in a way that doesn't. Again, it's not in an inquisitive way. It's not in a, holy crap, you guys have been lying to us for 50 years kind of a way. It's just like, oh, well, yeah, there's UFOs, whatever. What's on Dancing with the Stars tonight kind of thing. So there's that version of disclosure. And then there's what I think appears to be an alliance that is counter and undermining the deep state agenda and is trying to release more truthful information. Grander of what is being called a full disclosure, which is, so in other words, instead of having a limited tailored disclosure that is only a little bit of the whole truth, but only enough so they can keep this manufactured version of reality in place, the full disclosure unveils the full complement of everything that's been happening, like free energy technology, human trafficking, all sorts of really intense things, especially our connection to the cosmos and the divine purpose of the planet itself. That's a huge component of the disclosure that's probably going to be coming out at some point. So whether or not that happens sooner or later, I don't know. I would say that my opinion on this matter now is that based off of everything that's been happening over the past year, I'd say that the alliance is picking up a lot of steam, but they are very careful in how they promote this full disclosure agenda. And it seems like we're getting to the point where we might have some major revelations coming out, which could happen as early as this year.
Yeah, that would be absolutely fascinating. I mean, imagine talk about a major turning point if that becomes common knowledge and there was full disclosure, in our lifetime, but it makes sense because, information is now so, it's moving so quickly. Yeah, it also, the internet and whatnot, it opens up a lot of opportunity for disinformation as well. But it's you look at things like the Me Too movement, or, there's a lot of things that have sort of been in the shadow, or things that are happening with like the Catholic Church and priests, and, a lot of things, dark things are sort of like, okay, there's nowhere to hide anymore. Like it's all coming out. And so it seems like it would, if it's not happening, sooner than later, it seems like it's going to be just increasingly difficult to sort of hide.
Right. Yes, exactly. And these guys are really good at conditioning the masses so that even when they do disclose something, the masses don't really understand the true importance. They're not capable of interpreting the inferences and the suppositions and the consequences of what that piece of information means, because the cabal have done a number on us. I mean, they've destroyed critical thinking. They've destroyed people's ability to philosophize and interpret reality. So, a good example of this is the Satanic Panic. The Satanic Panic, the moral panic of the 80s, I would argue, it was their attempt to prepare the collective consciousness for all of the things that are going to start to be disclosed and have been disclosed through the internet. And, once the Satanic Panic came through, people were taking that issue seriously, human trafficking, satanic ritual abuse seriously. Then a whole bunch of people were convinced that it wasn't true, even though there was some truth to it. And now anybody that you talk to about this stuff, they're like, oh, you're crazy. You're just talking about the stuff that was debunked in the 80s, even though there's a lot of truth to it. So,
right.
This is why, taking the reins of your own philosophy, like asking yourself, well, how do I interpret these things? What does this mean to me? What is the ultimate meaning of this? Like, taking that on is really important, because if you don't, then you're basically outsourcing that interpretation faculty to a group of people that probably don't have your best interests at heart.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So, needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. So what are your thoughts on sort of the other side of this, in a sense, kind of the other side of the coin? You have some of these darker, control ideas that we've been controlled and so forth. And then you've got the other side of the coin, this idea that's sort of gaining a lot of attention and energy and talk, and that we're ascending, right? So breaking free of any shackles and evolving into this next greatest and grandest version of humanity, and sort of the merging of dimensions or veils, or moving into 5D. You hear a lot of these things thrown around. What is your thought on overarching view of the idea of an ascension that's taking place?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of validity to that.
Agreed.
The idea of an ascension, that we're going through a kind of grand spiritual awakening that's going to completely transform reality as we know it, either at a personal level and also at a global level, and even at a cosmic level. That there's something that's happening on the Earth that's very special. And when we go through this shift, the whole universe is going to be going through some grand cosmic ascension event. So that's one variant of it. I mean, huge topic. There's a whole bunch of different variations of what this ascension event could look like. There's the kind of more religious rapture type of event where the chosen ones will be lifted off the planet and saved by, the angels. And then we have like a more new agey variant of that, which is like, well, it's not angels and God, it's extraterrestrials that are going to be saving the people with the highest frequency. So then there's that kind of like a subversion of that. And then there's, another version where the earth is going to bifurcate, and like the people who have raised their vibration properly and have ascended to the 5D are going to go with that planet. Everybody who's dark and evil or is not developed enough is going to go to the other planet. I don't know which one is ultimately the truth, but I will say that there's a common theme throughout a lot of these ascension ideas, which is you being the forefront player of what determines this. So in a sense, the ones that resonate the most with me acknowledge our participation. So it's not that ascension's happening to us and we just have to sit on our hands and wait for it to happen. No. It's that we are participating in this event, that when we raise our vibrations, when we master ourselves, when we gain competence of our own consciousness, when we learn how to use our mind properly and integrate our emotions and live happy, productive lives that are in concert with divine law and respecting other people's rights and things like this, we literally change our vibration at a material level. And then that, and through entrainment or sympathetic resonance, that can actually raise the vibration of the planet. And I can certainly speak to some of the science behind that because I understand some of the physics. But yeah, I would say that we, in my estimation, my current belief, if I can use that word, what I currently hold to be true provisionally, is that we are going through an energetic shift. The sun is going through a greater expansion of its energies as it passes through these newer areas of the galaxy, and that the whole solar system is going through an energetic shift, and that our collective consciousness is part of that shift. So there's a reason why all of these harsh truths and the apocalypse is happening, the great unveiling. It's because in order for us to actually raise our consciousness properly, we have to consume and absorb all of the truth that we possibly can, integrate it into our person, into our beingness. And then when we do that through a dynamic process of self-mastery, then we actually raise the consciousness of the planet, and then now we're actually able to go through this, what could be a grand solar flash event or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things, of course, hearing the idea of the pole shifting in dramatic fashion at some point is, of course, one that you hear about. And, I personally really resonate with the idea of, each and every one of us is sort of our own private universe, right? Our YO universe. And you are taking a very active role in your own ascension, and there's all sorts of alternative versions of what that looks like and alternative timelines, and you sort of are stepping into the version that's the most reflective of you and your progress and what you've co-created. And when you take the idea that everything out there is sort of a prop in your movie, and you are the center of your own private universe, in a sense, a focal point of consciousness where, I think I saw a quote recently that was great. It was something to the effect of, sources, this is a circle and the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere, and we are that focal point of, your own private universe, and it's all happening around you, and you're a prop in my movie and I'm a prop in yours, and so this idea that it's like everything, you actually are determining and dictating to some degree how that ascension looks for you, and you, source, your higher self is so vast in its potential, it can create all sorts of iterations of what that looks and feels like.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And your choices literally affect timelines. So, when we think about the deeper aspects of the essence of reality, like what is time, what is space, what is free will, what is mind, what is consciousness, they're all wrapped up together at the highest or, at the basest levels of reality. And when you make a choice, literally that choice is collapsing timelines. It carves a path in consciousness through time and space. So your choices are really important. And when you kind of take ownership of that and you start to think about what that means in like a grand sense, then you can really kind of attune your minds to what you could do potentially to raise your vibration, to actually embody this like higher path. And, it's not something that's like just this pie in the sky kind of thing. Like your life will literally change for the better, and you can see it happening when you do this.
Right. Absolutely. I agree fully.
So, yeah.
So I always love hearing a story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story. Something tells me that you'll have something good up your sleeve to share.
Sure. Oh boy, I might have too many stories.
Oh, well, hey, you know what? Story time. We will make as much time for whatever story or stories you want to share, because a good story is about my favorite thing.
Right. Well, I already kind of told you one of the bigger ones, which is that, I was having all these synchronicities when I was a young child about searching for information and finding it. So that was pretty impactful.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Well, here's an interesting tapestry of synchronicity. So I have a really good friend and colleague that I work with now. We're currently working on a Restore the Rule of Law project, which is going to help people, give them like really good lawful tools to protect their rights and create good community. And essentially, it's the science of how to make the world a better place.
Cool.
So we're working on that. Really inspiring stuff. And how I met him is a tapestry of synchronicity. So here we go. So I started Stillness in the Storm back in 2013 with my partner, Julian. And right at the time, I would say about 2 or 3 months into starting the actual website portion, where we're posting articles, I was posting information from a resource, and that my friend of mine happened to find my website because I posted this information from a resource called Eucadia, which is an amazing body of lawful knowledge about all sorts of things. So he ended up discovering my site through posting that information. Now, I ended up going to Morocco with a group who was also into the law, and we were trying to start an intentional community because we wanted to basically take these 5D new paradigm principles of abundance and living life and create like a nexus of that we could use to help showcase to the world like what a better way of life could be if we started living with these principles. Well, it didn't end up working out, but he ended up coming to visit me out in Morocco. So I met him for the first time in Morocco. So we ended up leaving. I left Morocco in 2015 in May and landed in a town called Harvard, Massachusetts. And it just so happened that a week prior to me getting there, this friend of mine had also landed in the same town.
Oh, wow.
Now, we weren't talking to each other or anything like that, but we were working with another law group called the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, ITNJ. We were both writers for this organization. It's a global organization. There's people all over the world in it. And we were at a meeting, and we were just, having conversation before the meeting started, like, hey, where are you guys at in the country? And we both realized that we were in the same exact town, and we had just landed there within a week of each other.
Wow.
But again, we weren't like friends or anything. We hadn't been talking. I just met this guy once.
Wow.
So then we started hanging out with each other. Come to find out, he was interested in this Restore the Rule of Law group that I was also interested in. And now we both work for that organization. And now we're very closely associated. So this is like, synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity, all leading to us, basically meeting each other. We kind of looked at each other at one point and was like, I kind of get the impression the universe wants us to spend some time together.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, the threads of connectivity like that, when here's someone that is so important to your path. And I've been I don't know if you've ever read the book Journey of Souls. It's a pretty fascinating case study of life between lives. And it's really cool how it's sharing, okay, I'm going in to my next life, and let's plan this out, right? Let's plan where we connect and where we meet, and you're going to be this significant character at this time, and it's such a cool thing when you actually, first off, you have that perspective on reality, right. Like I think an ever-growing number of us do, but then you also you make one of those connections, which sort of happened to me recently, where a lot has unfolded from this kind of random way to meet someone. And it's just like, obviously this is someone that that like this is a designed, planned encounter because so much is like sort of blossoming from it. And it's such a fascinating thing to behold and be a part of. And I feel like as we sort of ascend, we're only going to see more of it. Like that's what it feels like to me. It's like, okay, now you're ready to have like an onslaught of these types of experiences of these characters that are meant to play significant role in co-creating your experience on a go forward.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of think, I'm curious of your thoughts on this. I feel like synchronicity is the universe laying like a trail of breadcrumbs for you. And
for sure.
One of the things I've noticed is, I'm having this thing where I get like double and triple synchronicity. So I'll look at my phone. It'll say like 11:44. It'll also have like a 33% charge, and I'll also have like an 11% charge on my computer. So it's like, okay, I get it. Yeah. What's the message here? You know?
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like, it's like the onion, the multi-layered onion of synchronicities. And it's just like, wow, the threads of connectivity run so deep. It's, the more you're looking, the more you see them. And it just, and it really gets weird. You mentioned earlier, like sort of things reflecting even in a program or something like that. I've had that even with a show that I've been watching recently that is crazy. The amount of things that the show's called Outlander, and it's about this time traveler, and So I mean, the amount of synchronicity that keeps to unfold and like reflect in my life from the characters' names, and the main character is Claire Beecham. It's spelled Beauchamp, but actually, you and I talked about this earlier. Pronounced Beecham. My mom is, Susan Claire Beecham, and then every other character. Like now, they've just in the new season they've gone to, and then like this character Frank is in it, and at the time, a Frank had just come in my life who had kind of been a villain, and then there's a villain aspect to this character's lineage in the show, and then and then I mean I could go on and on. There's so much, but then the new season that just came out, it's like, they all go to from Scotland. The whole show's in Scotland, in England, to they go to the New World in the 1700s to America, and they go to North Carolina, and there's this character Roger. Well, all my relatives are from North Carolina, and my dad's name is Roger, and it just like and that's only some of them. Like literally, that's like a third of the synchronicities. I won't keep going, but it just keeps unfolding in a way like, oh my gosh, this is really wild. Like, and then what is, and then the question becomes sometimes like, well, what is it trying to tell me? Right. And I think in some cases, what I've come to is it's not even necessarily, is there always like some deep, profound message other than notice the threads of connectivity and reflection. And you're obviously on a path that is an ideal timeline, or a potential, one of your I always say the greatest and grandest version of yourself. There's a particular timeline that you would choose above all others. You're either on that timeline or right up there, out of the myriad of choices. And so, as you're seeing those things, in some cases there is a really powerful meaning and piece of information or connection that's meant to be made. And in other times, I think it's just like, okay, I'm seeing reflections of, my life in the out there, so to speak, because there's really no out there, right?
Yeah. I think it's multi-pronged, like you said. I think part of it is the universe is trying to like poke holes in our mundane conception of reality. So we tend to think like, well, we're just, reality is just unfolding. It's kind of mindless, and there's no purpose behind it, and it's all random. And the universe is like, no, that's what you think. So let me throw some synchronicity in your face, because it's basically going to invalidate your belief that reality is all random, that everything's actually connected. So I think that's a huge part of it. And for me, like one of the things that I learned this, I want to say I got it from the Law of One, but maybe I got it from somewhere else. But somebody transmitted this idea to me, which is that when you see a synchronicity, regardless of what it is, take a moment to think about whatever thought just passed in your head, whatever interpretation, your mood, or even something that's happening in your environment, because there might be something you can notice there that'll highlight something. And that's one of the things I've noticed is a lot of times I get these number synchronicities or or I'll have one. I don't know if you ever had this happen where I'm literally thinking or writing something. I'm writing an article. I'm writing about some research. And then I hear on the radio or I hear in a video I'm listening to or in the conversation, somebody literally says the word I just wrote down, like, and it lines up perfectly.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, what's all that about? And in those instances, I feel like it's the universe being like, hey, that idea you just were thinking of, this is important. You should think about this more. You know?
Yeah, I think that's a really wise way to look at it. Is like, okay, because you get a lot of the number synchronicities and whatnot, and it's it's sometimes like, okay, what does all this mean? Well, yeah, I think that's a really smart thing to explore and analyze. Okay, well, what were you thinking? Where were you energetically when this unfolded? And it's sort of like putting a stamp of, yes, that, look at that more, or pay attention to that, or I'm sort of, I condone this. Yeah. I condone that thought. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, I'll throw an anecdote out there for you. I was one time, I was going for a walk, and it was in a somewhat public place, but enough where I could walk around and the people around me. It was like in a type of a park situation. I had this thought that, a random act of kindness is a really good thing. And I was kind of just like thinking about how important that is. And then as I'm thinking about and talking to myself, I'm recording a voice memo about it. I walk and I cross paths with a woman who's clearly distressed and needs some help. So I'm like, oh, well, let me do this. So as I'm like looking at my phone, I happened to just look at my phone for whatever reason. And I saw the number synchronicity right as I was talking about this moment. And then right as I take a pause to like reflect on all this, I see this woman who needs some help. And I end up helping her. Like, she was lost a little bit. And she needs to figure out where her neighborhood was on the path. But it was like a perfect example of the universe kind of like poking me on the shoulder, be like, hey, Justin, get ready, something cool is about to happen. And then because I opened myself up to the kind of magical aspect of reality, being like, oh, what's happening? Lead me somewhere. I was led into a place where I could do something cool.
What a great example. Yeah, that's super cool. And, I often say that and quote Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And I think that's one of the most, the highest underrated activity that one can engage in, right? Like, when a lot of times we get so programmed to go about our life. Well, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? How do I get more for myself? And it's like, if you help enough others get what they want, you'll by default get what you want. That whole idea. And you start playing with this idea of, okay, maybe I'm not doing something. A lot of times people get lost in comparison. Oh, well, I don't have the life that Justin does or Brandon does. And, my life's mundane. And so, of course, all this magic unfolds for them. And it's like you can create magic with in the smallest moment and the most unknown place in the world. And you start doing that. And the magic is there just as much for you as it is for anyone else. And not only that then, opens you up to bigger, more expansive sort of experiences that maybe you would want to have come into your life. More of this, like we were talking about earlier with the show, a few minutes ago with the show. It's like, reality is way weirder and cooler and magical than you thought. And to me, I think that's a big part of what the ascension process is going to be. It's like, hold on, my life's becoming more like a story like Lord of the Rings or The Matrix or this whole, like, it's becoming more fantastical and magical. And, now my friends are talking about like communicating with beings all the time, or if this, some supernatural thing just happened that's really mind blowing. It's like, I think that's only going to escalate. And I think a lot of that can start with the very small things of, how can I be of service to others? Because there are no others. And I think that's a great jumping off point into more magic in your life.
Totally, completely agree. Yeah. I think there's a lot of, benefit that can be gained by even thinking that you can help other people. And, when you actually do that, I think I study a lot of psychology related to like male, female roles, particularly. And one of the consistent, if you need any proof to know that men are really aligned with the idea of wanting to sacrifice themselves to serve the public or to serve the greater good, look at advertisements for the military. And almost all the advertisements for military are pulling at a man's heartstrings and be like, look, service, doing something right for, the country and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's because we each, and I'm only highlighting men just for this particular example, but women obviously have it too. So we each come with this complement of unique skills as men or women, as the masculine and feminine, to serve each other. And when you really like step into that, like that belief that you can serve other people, and then you want to enhance yourself. I mean, that's one of the things that I discovered in my life. It's like, I really wanted to help people, but then I'm like, well, what am I going to do to help them? I better go learn something and, figure out something so that I actually have something to offer somebody. Then it highlights your place. So serving others not only gives you a direction to help other people, but it gives you a direction in your own life, because it now you orients you towards the mindset and the philosophy and the service. And man, yeah, once that happens, the great things start to happen.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great thing, my friend. This has been such a cool conversation. You're amazing, and so enjoyed it. And I feel like we could go another 2 hours down the rabbit hole, but perhaps we'll do that on another future episode, because you have so much wonderful wisdom and insight to share. What is the best way for people to connect who want to continue to follow your work? Is that to go basically to your website, or is there another way?
Sure. Yeah, it's stillnessinthestorm.com. That's my main hub website. I also am on Facebook. You can just do a search for Stillness in the Storm. We've got a big group, a lot of people communicate in there, so I'm constantly posting things on Facebook. I also have my YouTube channel, Stillness in the Storm. I'm going to start releasing podcasts. That's one of my goals for this year.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, so maybe I'll have you on my podcast one day.
I would love that. I would love that. Please.
And I've got my hands on a lot of different things. So a lot of the stuff I do, I don't really talk about publicly because it's sensitive operations. But I'm also doing. I'm working with a group to restore the rule of law. Like I said, I'm also working to finish my book, which is going to be all about spiritual psychology and self-mastery and the ideal path, and basically how to use the mechanics of our own consciousness to enhance our lives and make the world a better place. So all that can be found through my main website. And then I will also be launching a personal project this year. This is kind of like more of a condensed distillation of all the stuff that I want to talk about, not just the news and things like this that I have on Stillness. So yeah,
Gotcha.
That's how you can find me.
Excellent. Well, I have no doubt that many listeners will want to continue to follow your work, and that's definitely exciting about your podcast. Definitely keep me posted on that, and happy to do a shout out when it's launched, and let people know it's living and breathing in the world, because I have no doubt that people have resonated with you and your vibrational offering here today, and are going to want to get more of it if they can. So. Very, very, very cool. I do have one last question to leave you with, and that is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Justin Deschamps?
42. All right, what else you got?
I think I've gotten that one at least one other time.
Okay, I'll answer it seriously.
Some people are like, what is he talking about with that, right?
I know, right? Yeah, the movie's not that old, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. The meaning of life. I would say the meaning of life is to embrace the amazing mystery and adventure that is existence. So we're living embodiments of this infinite creator, and the infinite creator created this experience for us to discover our own amazingness, our own joy, our own gratitude, our own bliss. And the more you open yourself up to that, the more you actually see that in life. So I would say the meaning of life is the meaning of transformation, of the constant process of becoming the caterpillar to become the chrysalis to become the butterfly, and always going through that again and again, constant renewing and expansion and opening up of your consciousness. And then we do that together. We do that together in service and in love and in fellowship. We all not only enhance our own personal experience, but we make the entire creation better, and new and amazing and unfolding things are just around the corner in that regard. So that's what I would say the meaning of life is.
Yes, I love that. And I think of the quote, just when the caterpillar thought its life was over, it became a butterfly. So any of you out there who are going through, that dark night of the soul, or that tricky transition, the butterfly awaits for each and every one of us. And Justin, you are an inspiration, my friend. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and connect and share today.
Thanks, Brandon. You're a great soul. Keep doing your great work, and we'll see each other on the path.
Yes. Until next time, journey well.
Take care.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now if you go to positivehead.com/YO universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE, and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and grandest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.